How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the first edition of the Bucks Cream City Cast for the 2018-19 season. I'm Dylan Piccolo, and I'm joined by the editor-in-chief of Cream City Central, Alexander Juneau. And we were kind of thinking about what is the best way to kick off the Bucks season. Sports gambling is now legal, so we figured we'll throw our bookie hats on, and we came up with 12, right? 12.
I think it's a few more than 12. I didn't
Oh,
count.
okay. We have a significant number of over-unders that we will be talking about the Bucks season, and these range anywhere from Bucks record, Giannis MVP, and other general Bucks thoughts. So, without further ado, the maestro of this symphony that we're about to put out will be Al. So, Al, would you like to kick us off?
Yeah, so I threw all of these together based on sort of career averages and what we've seen up to this point and what people are projecting. Generally, they're just prop bets that are about just about anything. I tried to make them as interesting as I could. I tried to make them at the number that I thought would be tough. So the first one I got for you is Malcolm Brogdon starts, and I set it at 50.5. And I kind of think this one's interesting because of his health and also if he's going to be the starter at shooting guard for the entire season, if he'll lose that job, if they decide to make him a six man, or what the process is.
Sure. Well, like you said about his health, Malcolm Brogdon played in 48 of the 82 games last season, and he missed a significant amount of time with the lower body injuries. I'm pulling out my hockey book here, the lower body injuries. But what we've seen in preseason and on media day is Malcolm Brogdon kind of slotted in as that starting shooting guard. And I think a big part about Malcolm Brogdon starting is that Budenholzer likes his versatility. This right now with who you have in your starting five minus Brook Lopez, every single one of those guys I feel pretty good about handling the ball and bringing it up the court. So I think that's good because you want to have a lot of motion in the Budenholzer system, and you've seen it in the first preseason game, not the second one because it wasn't on TV. But I think that the ability to have different people bring up the ball just allows you to, not waste, 2 or 3 seconds. Yeah, you don't need to waste 2 or 3 seconds off the rebound if get it to the guy you want to bring it up. So I'd say I think the injury is definitely, he had mentioned in some interviews prior to the season that he's focused on getting his lower body stronger, and he'll log a lot of minutes. So I'd say over. I think you might see a couple spot DiVincenzo starts if he starts playing well, or if you need rest for him, or you could slide Snell in if think you need a more defensive lineup. But I think the over is probably a safe bet.
I think it's a safe bet because I don't think he'll lose the job. I think the only way that he loses the job is if he's incapable of starting, as in not healthy. I think the point you make really sold me on it, that they want somebody who can dribble there, because that's not Tony Snell and it's not Pat Connaughton. And I guess Sterling Brown might be a little bit better dribbler than those two, but really it might just be Dante or Dellavedova, and you don't see him losing the job to either of those guys anytime soon. So yeah, I think I'll take the over too. You kind of set me up for a transition to the next one with I set the over under for Dante DiVincenzo minutes at 1,000. That would average out to about 13 a game if he played all 82 games, which we probably shouldn't anticipate anybody playing all 82.
Right.
This would be pretty good for a Bucks rookie. It would be more than Thon Maker, less than Rashad Vaughn, but that was kind of a different year. That doesn't really. The Bucks weren't good that year. They won 30-some games. Last year, DJ Wilson played less than 100. So,
I think 1,000 is actually a pretty good mark to put it at. Even in the scrimmage in the first preseason game, DiVincenzo was the first guy off the bench. And I was really hesitant about the pick at first, just because I didn't really see how his offensive skills necessarily translated. I think his lack of separation skills, but I think that he's going to find a role on this team because he does all the little things. He doesn't really need to score in any lineup that he'll be out there with, to be honest with you. He's going to be there to keep the ball moving. He'll be there to get, crash the glass, as he's done very well. And, he went, 5 for 12 last night against the Timberwolves, I believe. And, he kind of got the, monkey off his back. I mean, he did not play well in summer league and everything, but I think that it's Budenholzer was there when they made the pick. And I think that's very important because he's had pretty good success with first round picks in his tenure with the Atlanta Hawks. I mean, most recently John Collins, who absolutely was a stud for a rather garbage Atlanta team last year. So I think that honestly, if I could just say like right about even, but I'd probably just hesitantly take the over because I think that, there is a lot. And I think another thing that we need to discuss about is maybe in a later podcast is kind of the logjam they have at shooting guard, because there's a lot of guys that are going to be like going for minutes.
Good guys. Yeah, I think you hit all the points that you would want to really cover. It's really tough to play 1,000 minutes. Is tough because we're talking about averaging about 14, 15 minutes a game, missing like no more than like 4 or 5 games if you're gonna not average in the low 20s. And we're talking about a guy who if you're a casual fan, he did not blow your socks off in the first preseason game. If you're a hardcore fan, you can see a lot of the more intricate stuff, the passing and the stuff like that, and you start to see why some people were excited. But he's got to be able to shoot. But I guess the question is, do you think he's going to be able to shoot? And considering that was what we thought his biggest strength was coming into the draft, I think, yeah, we think he's going to shoot. And I guess his ability to dribble the ball is better than Tony Snell's by a good margin. I would be shocked if Tony Snell is entirely out of the rotation, but like in terms of like an 8 or a 9-man rotation, it's not looking great for Tony at this point. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I think I'm going to hesitantly take the under. I think he ends up being an 800, 900 minutes guy, which there's no shame in that. That's more than Sterling Brown played last year. It's really tough to be a consistent contributor in the NBA.
I just wonder what they're going to do with Pat Connaughton, because I think that if he can knock down threes consistently, there's a role for him on this team, and yeah. I just wonder in what capacity that's going to be.
I think he's too good to not play. I didn't work a question in about him because I didn't want to do too many minutes questions, but the next 3 are all minutes questions. So with that said, let's dive right in to DJ Wilson minutes, 200. It's 3 times what he played last year.
I think that a lot of this will probably depend on who the Bucks keep on their final guy on the roster. I think if the Bucks slot Christian Wood in, I think that I'm going to take the under, because I think that kind of means, all right, DJ Wilson's not going to be giving us anything. We don't trust him to give us anything. And I think if they go with Wood, I think that's very there's a telltale sign of what they think about DJ Wilson's progression. But I think that, because I haven't really seen anything from DJ Wilson that I really can hang my hat on, because I think like athletically and physically, like he's a mold of what you want to see in the NBA, a stretch 4. But I think his lower body strength is just not there on the defensive end. And, he tweaked his hamstring in the scrimmage. But, that being said, if they keep like Tim Frazier, for instance, if they keep him, that could change everything, because that says, all right, well, we're not as deep necessarily at the 4. Maybe that means DJ Wilson will slot into some more minutes.
Yeah. I was like the biggest DJ Wilson guy for our staff at the time of the draft, and I'm going to take the under. I actually have serious concerns about whether or not he's going to make the team.
Sure.
which is sort of crazy that we've come this far about a guy that was taken just outside the lottery only like a little over a year ago at this point. Um, so I'm taking the under. Um, Tony Snell minutes was my next one. I think this is a little interesting just because his role hasn't really been what we thought it would be in the preseason. And like of all the guys out there, all the guys on the bench, Tony Snell has like the least to prove. Like we already know he's an NBA guy. He can play NBA defense. He can shoot NBA threes. I said his over under for minutes at 1,800. Last year he played 2,056 and he missed about 5 games.
Hmm. My math isn't good. How many minutes per game is that?
Um, it would be, assuming he played about 80 games, it would be about 23 minutes a game. He played
Oh,
27 minutes a game last year.
okay, so that's probably your, sixth, seventh, or eighth guy maybe on the team. So I don't know if I can necessarily slot him at that because I'm kind of in question with signing Pat Connaughton and Sterling Brown and everything. I'm kind of concerned about how those minutes are going to be rotated. So I think that might be a little bit high for him just because of the uncertainty we have with the minutes that will be given to all the shooting guards. And I mean, Tony Snell, he obviously is, more than likely a shooting guard, but at 6'7", he can slot into some small forward minutes too, which, if they're going small or something like that, or they need to give, Middleton or whoever a break, I mean, there's definitely an opportunity there. But I think just with the, unknown factors of the shooting guard position right now, I'm going to take the under.
Yeah, I think that's fair. It's also incredibly scary that in the second year of a 4-year deal for $44 million, that we're thinking that he's not going to play significantly less minutes than he played last year, over 200 less than he played last year.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it'll be sort of interesting how this all shakes out. The last minutes guy that I had was Thon Maker at 1,500. Last year, Thon Maker played 1,238 minutes, appeared in 74 games, which if you think about it is pretty good for a guy that seemed like he wasn't really going to appear in that many games. He averaged 17 minutes a game last year. I moved it up not only because he's entering a third year that is sort of really important to whether or not he's going to belong in the NBA, but also because we've already seen Bud use Thon as a 4. And if
Yeah.
Thon can play a 4, that's potentially more minutes that weren't previously on the table.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to kind of what they're going to be doing at the 4 position, and that can kind of also play into who they eventually end up keeping on this roster. Right now I would say Christian Wood is probably the early favorite after 2 games to make this roster. So you're thinking about who's at the 4 and 5 now. Obviously if you keep Christian Wood, Zeller won't be there, but so you got Brook Lopez, Thon, Christian Wood, Ersan, and Giannis. That's 5 guys looking to fill those minutes. And, I think that Thon's definitely going to have a jump, but we just have to see it more on a consistent basis. I mean, obviously, he was fantastic in the playoffs in a couple of games last year, and your mind kind of goes crazy thinking about what this guy can do potentially if he can continue to hit threes and continue to be a rim protector. But if he can do it on a consistent basis, I think Budenholzer is going to absolutely love him. And that's, in what the Bucks are trying to do, because he can hit corner threes, he can step out and defend a little bit, and he can protect the rim if he gets beat off the dribble. So what was the total again?
1,500.
1,500. I'm going to say that's probably over because I do think, like you said, the third year is such a crucial year. I think that if it's either going to be now or never, and I'm betting on the Bucks figuring it out right this year that it's going to be now or never. So and that takes a minutes allocation. So I think I'm going to take the over on that.
Not to be too pessimistic, but I am going to take the under. I love Thon Maker. I love his game. I love what his game should be in theory, I guess I should say. I do not think that's what we're going to get this year. Even with the open minutes potentially at the 4 and even a potential injury because John Henson misses games every year, I think John Henson's going to solidify himself as a 20-minute-a-game guy, 22-minute-a-game guy. Just for comparison, Thon and Ursan didn't play last night. I'm just looking through the box score and seeing that. John Henson played 15 minutes. He had 9 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 blocks. I think he might do a little bit more of what Bud wants from the center position than Thon, which is sort of crazy because we perceive Thon to be a much better shooter. Like, I'm not going to say that John Henson's a better shooter, but if he can move the ball better and protect the rim better, that might be all we need.
And I completely forgot John Henson in my listing of 4s and 5s, but honestly, I think a lot of the reason I think about that is because he started off the season so well for the Bucks last season, and then at the end of it, he just I kind of it wasn't really, he wasn't jumping off the page like that to me.
Are you talking about Henson or Thon?
Henson started off the season really well.
Henson had 6 blocks in game 1 against Boston. I thought he played really well before he got injured.
But and I think that it's consistency. I think that's what you need from the center position. Whoever is going to be the most consistent is going to get those backup center minutes because, the reason they got Brook Lopez, obviously it was a great deal at $3.2 million, but he's consistent. You know what you're going to get from him every night. He's a professional. And with Thon and John Henson and now even Christian Wood, those guys really lack consistent play on a night-to-night basis. And I think that if one of them emerges as the consistent guy, and you can see that in the early part of the season, hell, even preseason, I think that'll be the guy that emerges in that backup center spot.
That's fair. I'll transition to my next question just because I think it sort of fits on what you're talking about with consistency from the center spot. Brook Lopez points per game, 12.5. He had 13 last year with the Lakers, his lowest since his rookie season where he also had 13.
I think if the Bucks are a successful team, Brook Lopez will be right around 13 or 14 points a game. I think that is pretty crucial to their success because if that's happening, that means the ball is being moved. Brook Lopez is getting easy shots, and that means he's converting on those shots because that's what they pretty much want. When you get ball movement, like the Budenholzer is expecting this ball to move, you're going to get a lot of shots for Brook Lopez. And it'll be interesting because either defenses are going to go, all right, I'm going to try to plunge the paint, and I'm going to get Giannis 3 or 4 guys on him and try to stop him down. And heck, if Brook Lopez shoots, if he shoots however many threes, that's, we're going to lose that way, but that's fine. Or it's going to be, all right, we're going to lock up Giannis and we're going to stay on our guy, and Giannis is going to go crazy. So I think that a lot of teams in the NBA might not respect immediately what the Bucks are going to be doing offensively in the motion, and they'll be so focused on stopping Giannis. And Giannis has said, I'm an improved passer. My game's evolving. I can see the floor a lot better, and if someone's there in the corner, I'm going to hit him. And now that there's a guy that can at least semi-consistently knock down shots, I know he only shot about mid 30% last year from 3, but I think that's probably a safe number. I mean, he's going to average more than 10, I think.
Yeah, he would have to sort of totally fall apart from where he was last year, which I don't think we've seen any signs of or have really any reason to believe. He's not that old that you suspect a cliff fall at any moment. Yeah, this is kind of a safe number because even if he gets injured, his points per game shouldn't be affected by that unless it's hampering his game and he's still playing. I'm taking the over here. I think he's like a 14, 15 points per game guy. I actually think he gets a little bit of an uptick on a team that's going to be looking to pass the ball a little bit more. That would sort of be a really impressive starting lineup, if all the guys are averaging double digits per game. I mean, Brogdon would probably be the lowest, and he might be more of a 12, 13 guy. And some people do have concerns that usage won't sort itself well, but I think all of these guys can reasonably be staples of bench units that are pretty effective. Brook Lopez doesn't really need anybody to get him the ball. He can create his own shots in the paint, and he can spot up if you need him to. I think the diversity of his game, and I think he might see an uptick in minutes per game this season. So I think those reasons lead me to take the over.
Well, and I think everyone on the starting five can supplement each other. I think that, I think that's pretty fair to say. If we see this transition in Eric Bledsoe that it appears that we're going to be seeing from him, if he can keep defenders on their toes in terms of going to the basket, and that all happens within the motion of the offense, and we're not single-handedly saying, all right, Bledsoe, go get us a bucket. I think that we'll be in good shape because there's two guys on our team, I think, maybe three, if you count Lopez in the interior, that I'd say, all right, let's go get a bucket, and I think that would fit within the offense. I think it's crucial that the two guards, the 1 and 2, are fitting within the offense and being supplementary pieces. But I mean, yeah, Bledsoe will probably end up being the Bucks' third leading scorer, but I think he can still do that within a supplemental role.
Yeah, I would agree with that. My next question, I think this is a little bit of a tougher one. Sterling Brown 3-point percentage, 36. He finished in the, I think, 35.3 or 35.6 last year. The key for him is really making his shots, because we saw his shot kind of go away from him at the end last year after kind of a hot start. He was sort of bad within the arc, but sort of fine from without the arc. I thought about going with another minutes question for Sterling, because I think it's a big question for him as well with this shooting guard rotation. But I feel like his 3-point percentage might be a determining factor in his minutes, so that's why I picked that.
And what was the percentage one more time?
36.
36. So you're asking, he was 35.2% last year. So you're saying he's going to be slightly better than he was last year. And I think that, once again, I hate to keep bringing this up, but I think it pretty much revolves around what kind of minutes he's getting, because and who he's out there with. He and it's about confidence with him. Sometimes he can get in a slump and he's just a streaky shooter. And he got to play last year, which I think is big. As a second round pick, he's a great defender. He's pretty athletic. He can do pretty well driving to the basket, but it's all about confidence with him. If he can start getting some rhythm shots and some rhythm threes, which is supposed to be, one of the big things that we're getting from this Budenholzer offense, I think that he can shoot about where he was last year and a little bit better. So I'm going to take the over. I don't think he gets to 40%, but I think, anywhere in between that, 36 to 38 range is probably what he's going to be at. But I think that's mostly benefit of being in Budenholzer's system. But the only concern I really have would be the minutes.
Yeah, I think it's a good point that it matters who his minutes are with. If he's playing with Delly for a lot of his minutes, like if Delly's the primary backup point guard and we don't really see a good stagger with Brogdon and Bledsoe, you got to worry a little bit that the looks he's going to get aren't as dynamic as, say, the ones that Brogdon will get. I'm going to take the over. It's 37-38 seems like a good spot that he'll settle in at. I think, he'll take enough shots this summer to just make that incremental improvement. I would be worried if he shot below this mark. If he shoots below this mark, then you start having concerns about his long-term fit if he doesn't do a whole lot of other stuff. But if he's just below it, I'm not sure it matters. But really, to be a good shooter, you have to be above that 35, 36 mark, especially if you're a wing.
Yeah, and I think it's a big year for Sterling because he has to define a role on this team moving forward.
My next question, Bledsoe, 3-pointers made, so kind of along the same line. Last year, Bledsoe made 121 with the Bucks, 125 for the season. He made 4 with the Suns before he came here. Not sure that matters a whole lot, but I'm setting the over-under at 140. Last year was his most ever in his career at 125. So we did see a little bit of an uptick. I think his previous career high was like 106. So it would take another jump, but curious what you think.
Kind of what I had mentioned before. Bledsoe, he shot 6 3-pointers in the first preseason game and made 3 of them. Albeit, one was a half court attempt that he ended up making. I just I think that Eric Bledsoe is a good 3-point shooter when he's in the position to shoot, when it's his turn to shoot. When it's a late shot clock situation and he gets it and he can't really, there's not really enough space. I think he struggles with that. And some of that might be his size a little bit with the longer point guards on him and stuff. But I think that obviously you're assuming that he gets a bit of an uptick in three-point attempts just from being in Budenholzer's system, which, that's kind of the name of the game when it comes to that. So I'm going to take the under, and I know it's a little contradictory of what I just said, but I think I'm going to take the under because I think that Budenholzer is going to get to Bledsoe and kind of remind him that what he's best at. He's best at being a physical guard, getting guys to the rim, and working. And I think, working in pick and roll with Lopez and, Giannis and all those guys, I think that he's going to really focus on penetrating because, the more he's hanging outside, and I mentioned this about him being a supplemental player, the more he's penetrating, the more that rotation keeps going. And I think that's going to be a kind of a big part of the offense. So I'm going to take the under.
I'm going to take the over. I think he gets just to this mark. The sort of complicated part is that it would require another jump, and that's always tough to take jumps in the amount of 3-pointers made in back-to-back seasons. And I wouldn't be shocked if he played less minutes under Bud than he did under Prunty and Kidd, just to get him a little more rest as he nears his age 30 season. I actually think that sort of how we'll see his season unfold is he's going to start on pace for this mark, on pace to shatter it. His first few games, he's going to come out just gunning from 3. And then we're going to see the other team make an adjustment where they start to respect his jumper more, probably around game 10, game 15, as his volume from distance increases. And then I think we'll see him penetrate and take a lot of advantage of that and cool his 3-point attempt numbers a little bit. But I still think he'll get enough to get there. I think he's going to get a lot of wide open threes off the catch this year instead of having to take so many off dribble handoffs and stuff like that. I think I have one question left before we get to the Giannis questions. Yeah. Chris Middleton, points per game. Last season, he cracked 20 for the first time in his career. I figure Coach Bud has never had a 20-point per game scorer. The Bucks are looking to have higher usage spots at the shooting guard and center spots. So I reduced his points per game because I think his minutes will go down a little bit too, to just 20 on the dot instead of, I think he averaged 20.6 last season.
Yeah, it was 20.1.
Oh,
I'm looking at his basketball reference, and his real first name is James?
Yeah, it's James Christian Middleton.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, I know. It feels like your entire life's a lie, right?
So 20 points per game. I think the Bucks kind of relied a lot on Chris Middleton to bail them out last year for an offense that really lacked any flavor, movement. Chris Middleton dominated ISO situations pretty much the majority of the season. He benefited from a couple big games when Giannis was out.
He tossed in 40 twice.
Yeah, so I think that kind of has a little bit to play with it. I do think that you're correct on his minutes usage. I think his minutes is going to be, he was 36.4, and I think, he worked through that really well. He seemed fresh at the end of the year and everything, but I think an effective Chris Middleton is a Chris Middleton that can play on both sides of the ball, and I think that getting the most out of Chris Middleton, dropping those minutes back down to about 30, give him a couple more minutes of rest, and then hopefully you can see that benefit rise on the defensive side of the ball. So I think points per game, you're probably, I think 20, maybe 19 is probably where he's going to be. I don't see a drastic, he's not going to drop to a 16 point per game guy, because you do need to score, and he is that number 2 option that the Bucks need. But at the same time, you definitely need to consider the system he's going to be playing in. And, Budenholzer's been preaching, get off your feet. They want their guys to be in the best shape that they can be. So I'm going to say under on that.
I'm going to take the under too. It wouldn't shock me if it went up. Like, it would not shock me at all if his attempts from three go up. And I don't think he's going to go from 36 to 30. But, like, if we talk about him going from 36 minutes a game to 33 minutes a game, like, that's an extra 250 minutes less that he has to play over the entire season. That could bear dividends on the other end of the court in the playoffs. I think he's an 18 point per game, 19 point per game guy this year, and that's no shame in it. But you're upgrading at center from like John Henson and Thon Maker, who both have really low usage and are like 8 point per game type guys, to Brook Lopez, who can score, can shoot, and he's like a 13, 14 point per game guy, like we said earlier. So that kind of bears in mind somehow. The Bucks are going to score more points per game this year, and maybe that's part of our calculations. Well, I say calculations, but we're just talking this through. We're not doing any math whatsoever. But
Thank God.
Yeah, we're not claiming to be projectors or the stuff they do in baseball where they got really good projections and stuff like that. We're just really spitballing here.
Well, that's the thing. Who knows, really? Because, like,
it could go anyway. Yeah.
It really could. And that's with a lot of things that we've talked about today. I mean, Budenholzer's going to have his own way to look at things. And, we're so used to Jason Kidd, and I don't like being used to Jason Kidd's system. But, we don't really know. I mean, we can look at Atlanta and see what he did with Atlanta, but he's never had a player like Giannis. So it's going to be and I don't think there is another player like Giannis in the league. So it's going to be really interesting to see what he can come up with.
On that note, we proceed to our Giannis portion of the podcast. The first over-under I set, Giannis 3-pointers made. I think that we've seen him gunning a little bit from distance in the second game. He had 3 attempts. I think he only had the one in the first game, but that one was sweet. It was a pull-up sort of in a semi-transition where he just got a great look and he just swished it. Nothing but the bottom of the net. We always talk about if Giannis has a 3-pointer, but I didn't want to get too ambitious with it. He made 42, I think, last year. So I upped it to 75, which I think is a big jump. It's about 1 made per game if he misses a few games.
All right. So this is maybe the most interesting question we've had so far, because if he hits the over on this or right around, this set target, you can assume that he's gotten better at shooting, and the coaching staff thinks that they can use him more as a 3-point shooter. I think an interesting stat to bring up. So mostly pretty much any basketball fan that you ask them if you think Joel Embiid's a good 3-point shooter. Most of them would say yes. And I think it's a stigma because he's a center, more of a back to the basket guy, but he has the ability to stretch it out. Joel Embiid shot 30.8% from 3 last season. He made 66, shot 214. Giannis, on the other hand, he had, he made 43 on 140 attempts. So, yeah, Joel Embiid actually and Giannis are pretty comparable 3-point shooters, but Joel Embiid just shoots a couple more a year, and that's what people think. So I don't think it's really far-fetched to think that Giannis could actually add that part to his game. I think that his mid-range is a really telltale sign about how his shooting is going. Yeah, it's a 3-pointer. It's further, obviously, but there's going to be defenders sagging off of him. And if he can knock down that shot, which I'm assuming, he's been working on it, obviously. And I think that, when we see Giannis's progression as a shooter, we're definitely going to see it more, that Dirk Nowitzki, kind of Kobe Bryant, turnaround, step back type thing. And 3-point may not be as big a part of his game, but it's a part of the game that he needs to have no matter what. So I'm going to say that he's going to be under that, but I think it's going to be slightly under that.
I'm going to take the optimistic approach. I'm going to say he goes over it. I do think that 75 might be a little high, and it might be a little bit more divisive or tough to bet on if I set it at 70 or 65. but I think it is a new system. I think that there's going to be a more of an expectation for him to shoot it when he catches it. I do think his mechanics looked a little better in the preseason game and just in what we've seen in the offseason and workout videos and stuff like that. He still goes back a little bit when he shoots, even like a flat-footed shot, which is kind of just weird. I'm not like a shot doctor or anything, but they'll tell
Yeah.
you that that's what you don't want.
He like
But
kicks his head back a little bit too.
it's more just like a shoulder lean. It's not like a full body. Like,
Right.
yeah, it's not perfect, but the arms look a lot better. And he's hit 2 in the preseason. All he has to do is make 1 a game. I think he's made 3 in a game before. So like if you think about it, it could average out pretty nicely, even if he just gets off to a hot start. If he makes 30 in the first month, well not October. If he makes 30 in November, then he's probably going to hit it pretty easily. All you have to do is make 2 a game for 1 month and then half of 1 a game for the rest of the month or whatever. So I think he gets it. Let's get on to another Giannis question. Giannis points per game. Last year, let me just pull up what he was at last year so I don't misspeak it. I think it was, 26.9, so just a touch under 27. I moved it up to 28.5. I think we've seen Giannis take a leap every year he's in the league. I think this would be like his smallest points per game leap, but at a certain point, you reach like
max out. Yeah.
Yeah, like he's not going to average 38 a game this year. Like that's just not what guys do, and it's not what Budenholzer's system is going to really call for.
I am going to take the over. And I think that he's going to take the over simply based on the fact that there's going to be more space for him to operate. And I think that, we talk about the 3-point shooting and what everyone else is going to get, how everyone else is going to benefit from this, but it really just starts with Giannis. If these guys around him can knock down open threes, the team defenses are going to have to pick their poison. And, I think that Giannis, like we talked about him adding a 3-point shot, heck, he makes like, what was it, 30 more threes that we're saying setting the bar at. I mean, that's going to give him an uptick in points per game. You're going to talk about the pure ease that he's going to have getting to the basket with this space. And I think that the thing about Giannis is that he's such a hard worker. And I don't know this. I've never seen him work out. I can't talk to about it, but from everything that I've heard about this guy, he just has a hunger to get better. He's not a superstar that's going to take it easy in the off season or whatever. He's working. He's trying to improve his game.
It does not sound like he ever coasts in workouts or anything.
No, and that just goes. It just tells you what he wants and what he can do. I mean, this guy came in at 18 years old and he was a raw physical talent. Didn't have any skills. Now, I mean, he had some obviously like finishing or whatever and dribbling he was pretty good at, but everything else he's learned while he's been in the NBA, and he's only 23. Yeah. 23, turns 24 on December 6th. So he's going into his age 24 season, and he's already a perennial all-NBA player. He'll be an all-star for the next 10 years. He could be defensive player of the year whenever he wants to be. Honestly, I think that, setting the bar at 28.5 is fair because I think he's going to take the jump. And I think that, I don't know if you have an MVP over under, but I think that he's poised to take that next leap, and especially under Budenholzer.
I'm not going to spoil anything about the later prompts, but I'm also going to take the over. I would be curious if you ticked up his free throw percentage 3% last year. How does that change his points per game average? If he spends an entire summer working on his shot, that should pay dividends at the foul line as well. So the combination of threes and foul shots, just being more efficient there, not even to mention the other spacing, we might see it more from an efficiency than a usage thing or anything else. I also think it bears mentioning that we spend a lot of time talking about his shot, but every year we spend a lot of time talking about his shot, and he ends up improving somewhere else and just being a much better player. So he might improve in an area of basketball that I don't even really understand until somebody smarter than me will explain it to me in a month or two. So I don't know. He could be better as a role man. He could be used more as a role man. It could have a lot to do with play type and usage because we're not going to see him in isolation. And he was a good isolation scorer last year, but we're just not going to see him take up as many possessions doing that. Like, if we just get to see Bledsoe, Giannis pick and roll, Chris Giannis pick and roll, he's going to feast. Like, it doesn't matter if he's the ball handler or the other guy. I shouldn't say the other guy, the role man, because I obviously know what the terms are. But we might just see him get a lot better due to play calling and stuff like that. I think I'm going to take the over. He's going to creep pretty close to the 30-point per game mark in my mind. But I also wouldn't be shocked if he stays similar to what he was this year just because of play calling again. I think they might run more plays for Lopez and Brogdon as a starter than they did for Snell and Henson.
Sure.
So my next Giannis question, I set his assist total at 5.9. I believe he was at 4.9 last year.
4.8.
4.8, and he was at 5.2 the year before. The year before, Chris was out for a large stretch of the season, and I think that sort of inflated his assist numbers because Chris didn't handle the ball at all. More ball handlers in the starting lineup this year, more ball handlers on the team in general. But I think his vision's improved, so I moved it up almost a full assist per game. What do you think?
I think it's a resounding over. In 2016-17, he averaged 5.4 assists per game. Didn't really have a whole lot of shooters around him, and didn't really have that vision that you see like LeBron have or other point guards. And I think that's important because, and just kind of being aware of how the basketball floor works in general, because I feel like the NBA style it's so different that you just know. And I know Eric Name mentioned, the new Athletic Bucks beat writer, had mentioned on Locked On Bucks that, he asked him about Jason Terry, about having a guy in the corner and having the corner always be there. Like, Jason Terry is going to be there. Now that there's going to be someone always there that can shoot. And I think that in itself is going to just have a huge increase in his. And let's say what I talked about before. Let's say that defenders still coming in on Giannis and they're still having 2 or 3 guys in there. That number could approach 7. It really could. I mean, I don't see that there being a way that it goes down. If that's also a question, I think that it has to go up. And if it's going up, that means the Bucks are playing successful basketball. Yeah,
I think I like, just sort of echoing back to the last prompt, I wouldn't consider it a lost season if he averaged 27 again and he increased his assists and he was more of a 27, 11, and 7 guy instead of a 30, 11, and 5 guy. Assists are really valuable. Him moving the ball at an elite level is really valuable. So I think I am going to take the over. I do think this over-under is fair, though. I don't think that the over's a lock by any means. It's just sort of the way I feel his game is going to progress based on the way the preseason's gone. I guess you can move it up to maybe 6.5 and make it harder, because the list of guys who average 7 assists per game really isn't very long.
Yeah.
It's like we're talking about elite scorers who have become very good ball handlers. Which brings us to the last question. Giannis MVP finish. I set this at 2.5, so the over would be first or second. The under would be third or lower. So it's not necessarily predicting MVP. It's saying, I think he's a top 2 guy.
I think you need to consider kind of what else is going on in the league. I think James Harden's going to get his. I think, I think Anthony Davis has a really good shot of winning the MVP this year. Obviously, you got to throw LeBron in there. I don't necessarily like to throw one of the Warriors guys in there because they kind of all do their part equally, and it's kind of hard to give them an award, especially since Kevin Durant's been there. I mean, when it was Steph, Clay, and Draymond, then you could give it to Steph because, 3's, less than 4, obviously. but I think maybe impact on the team. I think the team's win in total has a lot to go into this. I think his numbers are going to be what they are, and his numbers are going to be decent. But I think that the thing that gets him to the MVP is if the Bucks finish in a top 3 seed in the East. I think top 4, that could be enough to sway some votes over there because and especially if it's assists rise. And I think what you had mentioned about him going from, not 28, but if he stays at 27, 11, and 7, that's a dynamite stat line. And the way he plays defense, I think that could be enough. Gosh, I think that I am going to take. I'm at 2 or 3. I it's
That's
really
what makes it hard.
it's really hard because I think that at 2, I think that Anthony Davis is going to win the MVP. That's my prediction this year because I think that he's super good and people have been talking about him winning an MVP, and I think the Pelicans will actually be pretty decent this year. So
it is kind of interesting though that you're probably not predicting the Pelicans to be the 3rd seed.
no,
But
and
that's sort of a requirement for Giannis.
yeah.
I get it, it's East versus West, but like last year, the 3rd and the 4th seed in the East had more wins than the 3rd seed in the West. But I just think it's sort of an interesting note that they will be judged a little differently. If Anthony Davis is like the 4th or the 5th seed, he's going to get a little bit more leniency than Giannis if he's the 5th seed.
Correct. That's kind of what I was getting at. So, all right, 3, 2, 1, over.
Over?
Bucks and 6.
I'll take the over too. I think that he'll finish behind somebody. I'm not sure who that person is. He finished 5th last year, right?
I'm not sure. You keep talking. I'll look that up.
Okay, sounds good. I think he was close last year. Like, I honestly think that if he averaged the same stat line he did last year on a 50-win team, he's probably in the top 3 already. I think his stat line is going to get better. We were talking about what's going to go up more, his points or his assists. Yeah. It doesn't really matter. Whichever one goes up only bolsters his MVP resume, because I don't anticipate James Harden putting up those numbers again. I anticipate him falling off just a little bit as they sort of work in other guys. Not necessarily that Carmelo Anthony's going to take his numbers, but like he just doesn't need to again. He's won his MVP, and voter fatigue's a real thing.
He was 6th last year, just a one point behind Russell Westbrook for 5th, and then actually a pretty substantial gap between Westbrook and Giannis, and then number 4, Damian Lillard, who received 207 points, and Giannis received 75, and Russell Westbrook 76.
And like,
go ahead.
I was just gonna say that's not like the best indicator of how close he was to an MVP, but like I do think it does show something that like he was in the surrounding conversation.
Sure, and if you think about it too, let's look at where where like Portland finished in the in the playoffs last, or not in the playoffs, after the regular season. You know what I mean? They had home. I think they were the 3rd seed, right? I believe so. They were the 3rd seed, and they lost to the Pelicans. I mean, team success. Yeah. Team success has a lot to do with it. I mean, LeBron, obviously, he's going to be 1 or 2 because he literally puts a team on his back in Cleveland for the last couple of years. So, team success, I think, is maybe the biggest challenge that Giannis will face when it comes to winning the MVP, because the numbers are going to be there. And we had talked about Giannis's assist total. In Atlanta, Budenholzer's teams were always one of the higher assist total teams in the NBA. I don't think Dennis Schroeder led last year with 6, but I don't think you can. I like to put it as a reference point because I like to know that they pass the ball a lot and they're getting a lot of assists. But it's also different because you got to think about, all right, well, Giannis, no one's ever seen anything like him.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's really fascinating in its own right. Sorry, 1 second. How many the next prompts are all related to just the Bucks in general. The first one, Bucks All Stars 1.5.
Ooh, that is difficult. All right. So here's how I break it down. You got to look about what's in the East. Do the Celtics have 3 All-Stars? Probably, maybe somewhere around 3. I mean, you could probably maybe Gordon Hayward, maybe Al Horford. Then you can kind of look at what teams aren't going to have All-Stars, as many like Cleveland, and I don't know. I think that if it's going to be 2, obviously it's going to be Giannis and Chris. So you're just asking me basically if Chris Middleton's going to be an all-star this year. Let's see what I'm doing here. I'm breaking this down. Yes, I think that I will take Chris Middleton being an all-star, because I think if Bradley Beal can be an all-star, I think Chris Middleton can be an all-star.
I'm taking the under. I think that Chris's numbers will just get cannibalized a bit too much, and this is sort of required. Like, the Bucks have to get off to a really good start. If they get off to a really good start, then I think they can get the second All-Star, and I'm a little worried about that with the transition in coaching. But sort of on that note, how about Bucks seed 3.5?
This is a tough one.
I didn't know if 4.5 would make it too easy, just because this is sort of that basically means you're predicting them third, because I think most people have Toronto and Boston a comfortable margin ahead.
So that's saying you're basically going to be ahead of the 76ers, because I don't really see, and the Pacers, I guess.
Yeah, we'll see how good the Pacers are, but I do anticipate the Pacers being roughly as good as they were last year.
I'll probably reluctantly take the under, just because I think that like you said, starting out quick is kind of a big thing, kind of getting some momentum. I think 4 is where they're going to be slotted at. 3 or 4 obviously is kind of where I'm saying they're going to be. But I'm like 60% 4 seed, 40% 3rd seed. So yeah.
I totally feel that. I'm going to take the under 2. I just can't bet on this team yet. I wouldn't feel comfortable saying this team's going to be the 3rd seed. Like, if you asked me to put money on this, I would make up an excuse and walk out of the room. So that brings me to my final question. Bucks wins. I took the line directly from Vegas, so I didn't have to do any thinking on this one. 47.5.
I am going to take the over, because I think the team needs to take the over. I think there was like maybe eight losses last year that the Bucks had that were within 6 points. So I think that Budenholzer gets them those, what were they, 44 last year, right?
Yep.
I think that Budenholzer gets them 4 more wins. I don't really think that there's much explaining to do, because you listen to this whole podcast and pretty much everything.
We think they're going to get better. Yeah.
We think they're going to get better, and I think that Giannis is going to take a leap. Budenholzer is going to put everyone else in the right spots, and I think the defense will get a lot better too.
Yeah, I honestly would have set this higher. Like, if I was setting it myself, I think I would slide it up to maybe 49.5, make you predict 50 wins or less, and I think that makes it a little more interesting. I don't think this season's a failure if it's a 47-win season. I think that you can win 47 games, win a series in the first round, because I think 47 games could get you the 4th seed. Like,
probably
it would have. No, last year the Cavs won 50 and they were the 4th seed, I believe. But we're talking about a 4-5 matchup or a 5-4 matchup if you win 47. If you start getting even further under 47, then I think we would start to call this season a disappointment.
Sure.
I think new arena, new Giannis, new coach. Everybody's going to be better except for DJ Wilson. He's going to be worse. I don't know. It's just something. Somebody's got to be worse.
Yeah, I agree. I think winning a playoff series is basically the ultimate. I think you got to win a playoff series. Honestly, If they would have won last year in a playoff series, beat the Celtics, I would have called the season a success. Even if
it would have been.
Even if they
still would have been fired.
Right, he would have absolutely. But I mean, we took the Boston Celtics, who made it to the Eastern Conference Finals, to 7 games, and I think
who were 1 game away from the NBA Finals.
Yep, 1 game.
They went to Game 7 against LeBron.
Albeit no Kyrie, no Gordon Hayward, but
that was still a really good team.
It's still a really good team, and we're 1 overtime period win away in Game 1 from winning the series. That's how I look at it in my eyes. So, you got to win a playoff series. That's it. That's all I can kind of break it down to. If they don't win a playoff series, it's not a successful season. Even if they win 50 games, that you need to see some playoff success, because that's what it's really about. And Budenholzer still has a play. He has to get to the NBA Finals. He's done it as an assistant, but he's never done it as a head coach. So we just need to see continued playoff success, and I think that'll be as long as they're winning playoff series. Win a playoff series and at least be competitive in the second one, or hell, even win it and get to the Eastern Conference Finals. That's what it's kind of got. The mindset has to be.
I definitely agree. I'll take the over, and I will. I think we're there. I honestly think we're there, man. I know me and you are going to be at a lot of games this year, and I think this is just a better team, and we're excited for it, and we can't wait.
Absolutely. Well, I want to thank Alexander Juneau for coming up with this awesome list of questions. If you want to give him some congratulatory love on coming up with this awesome list, hit him up on Twitter at JunesFishes. Always check his stuff out at Cream City Central. And then you can check out our other podcasts. We have a cool Badgers podcast going. Badgers just beat Nebraska, so we're coming out with that one tonight as well. So a lot of content coming for you guys. My name is Dylan Piccolo. You can follow me at DP_hoops. Thank you very much, and have a good rest of your night.